cold November night in 1995, the last bus of Route 375 departed from Yuanminyuan Park in Beijing at 11:30 p.m. This was the final run of the day, carrying passengers through the dark, deserted outskirts of the city. What happened on that bus has become one of China's most chilling urban legends, except the terrifying part is that it might actually be real. The bus had only a few passengers, a young couple sitting near the front, an old lady, and 3 passengers in the back. The driver was making his usual route when at a particularly isolated stop, surrounded by darkness and old graves, 3 figures appeared from the shadows. They slowly boarded the bus. The passengers immediately felt something was wrong. These 3 men were Qing Dynasty clothing, the kind from over a century ago, with long robes that touched the ground. Their faces were pale, unnaturally pale, and they moved with an eerie stillness. But what made the young man sitting up front break into a cold sweat was this. He couldn't see their legs moving beneath those long robes. They seemed to glide rather than walk. The bus continued its journey through the desolate roads. An oppressive silence filled the air. Then, suddenly, the old lady began screaming at the young man sitting near the front, accusing him of stealing her wallet. She grabbed him and forcefully dragged him off the bus at the next stop, despite his protests. The driver, wanting to avoid trouble, simply closed the doors and drove away, leaving them stranded in the darkness. Once the bus was out of sight, the old lady released the young man. Her face was dead serious as she whispered urgently, "Those 3 men who got on, they weren't alive. I saw it clearly. They have no legs. They were floating. We needed to get off that bus immediately, or we would have died." The young man's blood ran cold. He wanted to dismiss her as crazy, but something in her eyes told him she was telling the absolute truth. They waited in the cold darkness until they could find another way home, both shaken to their core.
The next morning, news spread through Beijing that shocked everyone. Bus 375 had been found abandoned in the remote outskirts. The driver was dead. The young couple and all 3 mysterious passengers had vanished without a trace. The bus was covered in scratches on the inside, as if someone had desperately tried to claw their way out. There was blood, lots of it, but no bodies. Investigators discovered something even more disturbing when they checked the bus depot's fuel records. The bus's fuel tank had been drained almost completely, far more fuel than the usual route would require. It was as if the bus had driven somewhere far away, to some unknown destination, before being abandoned. Where did it go? What happened during those lost hours? The depot workers revealed something that made investigators' skin crawl. Months earlier, the area where those 3 figures boarded the bus had been an excavation site. Construction workers had unearthed 3 bodies dressed in Qing Dynasty burial clothes. The bodies had been disturbed and improperly reburied due to budget constraints. Old superstitions say that disturbing the dead without proper rituals invites vengeful spirits. Bus Route 375 was permanently discontinued after that night. The bus itself was reportedly destroyed, though some say it was hidden away because of what they found inside. Scratch marks that came from inside the fuel tank, as if someone had been trapped in there, and strange symbols carved into the seats that matched ancient death rituals. The young man and the old lady who escaped were never seen again in that neighborhood. Some say they moved far away, unable to sleep, forever haunted by what they witnessed. The young couple and the driver were never found. To this day, taxi drivers in Beijing refuse to pick up passengers near that old bus stop after dark. Locals claim that on foggy November nights, you can still see the ghostly outline of Bus 375 driving through the darkness, its windows filled with pale faces pressing against the glass, trying to escape. On November 13, 1974, in the quiet suburb of Amityville, New York, something evil possessed 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. At 3:15 a.m., he systematically went from room to room in his family's Dutch colonial house at 112 Ocean Avenue and shot his entire family to death while they slept. His father, mother, and 4 siblings, all murdered in their beds. Each victim was found lying face down, as if something had held them there. Not one of them woke up. Not one tried to escape, despite the deafening sound of gunshots echoing through the house. When police arrived, they found a scene of inexplicable horror. 6 people murdered, yet the neighbors heard nothing. The family dog, which should have barked frantically, remained quiet. Ronald claimed a mysterious voice had commanded him to kill them all. During his confession, he spoke about the house itself, about how it made him feel things, hear things, see things in the shadows. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was sentenced to life in prison, where he later claimed demonic possession. Most people dismissed his defense as an attempt to escape responsibility. The house was sold at a drastically reduced price. That's when the real nightmare began for the next family. 13 months after the murders, on December 18, 1975, the Lutz family, George, Kathy, and their 3 children, moved into 112 Ocean Avenue, believing they'd found their dream home at an incredible price. They knew about the murders, but didn't believe in ghosts. They lasted exactly 28 days. From the very first night, Kathy felt a presence watching her. George woke up every night at exactly 3:15 a.m., the precise time of the murders, drenched in cold sweat, compelled to check the boathouse where he'd see glowing red eyes staring back at him from the darkness. The children began talking to an invisible friend named Jody, a demonic pig with glowing red eyes that appeared in their bedroom window. The activity escalated rapidly. Swarms of flies infested the house despite it being the dead of winter. A crucifix mounted on the wall rotated upside down by itself. Kathy discovered a small hidden room painted completely red, with no explanation for its existence. The children's behavior changed dramatically after its discovery, becoming violent and withdrawn. Green slime oozed from the walls and ceiling. Doors were ripped from their hinges. Demonic faces appeared in the fireplace. George's personality transformed. The successful businessman became violent, obsessed, and began to physically resemble Ronald DeFeo Jr., growing a similar beard and losing weight rapidly. He sat for hours staring into the fireplace, seeing visions of the murders replaying before his eyes. Kathy experienced nightmares of the murders every night, seeing exactly how each family member died, feeling their terror.
A Catholic priest, Father Mancuso, came to bless the house. As he began the blessing in the sewing room, an invisible force slapped him across the face and a voice roared, "Get out." He developed painful blisters on his hands and became violently ill. His car was involved in a near-fatal accident on the way home. When he tried to call the Lutzes, the phone would emit pig-like squealing sounds. He eventually refused to return, warning them to leave immediately. Kathy's aunt was touched by an invisible force and felt herself levitating off the ground. She saw the apparition of a hooded figure and fled the house, refusing to ever return. Photographs taken during their stay showed a young boy with glowing eyes standing in the stairwell, a child who wasn't part of the family. The most terrifying incident occurred when George discovered a hidden room in the basement, a small, cold space with a mysterious purpose. After opening it, the paranormal activity reached a fever pitch. Kathy levitated off the bed. George saw a demon with half his face blown away, matching Ronald DeFeo's father's fatal injury. The children's beds shook violently. Doors slammed with such force they splintered. On January 14, 1976, after only 28 days, the Lutz family fled the house in the middle of the night, leaving almost all their possessions behind. They never returned, not even to collect their belongings. George Lutz later said that something in that house wanted them dead, wanted to possess them, wanted them to repeat what Ronald DeFeo had done. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated the house and confirmed it was infested with demonic entities. They documented cold spots, recorded EVPs of threatening voices, and photographed anomalies. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, claimed the house was built on land that had been used by a Satanist named John Ketchum in the 1600s for rituals, and was also a Shinnecock Native American enclosure for sick and dying tribe members, a place where death had soaked into the very soil. Skeptics have questioned the Lutz's story, suggesting it was a hoax for financial gain. But those who knew the family insist they were genuinely traumatized. George Lutz, until his death in 2006, maintained that everything they reported was absolutely true. The fear in his eyes when speaking about 112 Ocean Avenue never diminished, even decades later. Subsequent owners have reported fewer incidents, though many have left quickly. Some experienced nothing, others refused to discuss what they witnessed. The house's distinctive quarter-moon windows, the eyes that became iconic, have been remodeled away, and the address changed to discourage curiosity seekers. But locals still avoid that house. They speak of a darkness that lingers, of something evil that was awakened by the murders and never truly left. Ronald DeFeo Jr. spent the rest of his life in prison, dying in 2021, still claiming that demonic voices commanded him to kill. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, 6 people died horribly in that house, and everyone who has lived there since has felt that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong with 112 Ocean Avenue.
On December 4, 1872, the British ship Dei Gratia spotted a vessel drifting aimlessly through the Atlantic Ocean about 400 miles east of the Azores. As they drew closer, Captain David Morehouse recognized the ship with growing dread. It was the Mary Celeste, a merchant brigantine that had departed New York just a month earlier, commanded by his old friend, Captain Benjamin Briggs. Something was terribly wrong. The ship was sailing erratically, its sails partially set but torn and flapping in the wind. There was no one at the helm, no one on deck. Complete silence except for the creaking of wood and the wind whistling through the rigging. Captain Morehouse sent a boarding party to investigate, and what they discovered remains one of maritime history's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. The ship was completely abandoned. Not a single soul remained aboard. Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and the crew of 7 experienced sailors had vanished without a trace. But here's what made the discovery so deeply unsettling. There was no sign of struggle, no indication of disaster, nothing to explain why 10 people would abandon a perfectly seaworthy vessel in the middle of the ocean. The boarding party's report was chilling in its details. The ship's cargo, 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, was intact, with only 9 barrels found empty. The crew's personal belongings were all in place, pipes still on tables, clothes hanging neatly, personal items undisturbed. The captain's cabin contained his wife's jewelry and the family's valuables, things you would never leave behind if abandoning ship. Most disturbing was finding breakfast still sitting in the galley, plates and cups arranged on the table with food partially eaten, as if everyone had suddenly stopped mid-meal and vanished into thin air. The ship's logbook ended abruptly on November 25th, 9 days before discovery, with a routine entry noting their position near the Azores. Nothing unusual was recorded. The navigation equipment was functioning. 6 months' worth of food and water remained in storage. The cargo was valuable and undamaged.
Why would experienced sailors abandon a seaworthy ship with ample supplies? The only things missing were the ship's lifeboat, the navigation instruments, and the crew. The lifeboat davits were hanging loose, suggesting it had been launched deliberately, not torn away in a storm. But why? The weather had been relatively calm. There was no evidence of piracy. The valuable cargo and personal belongings proved that. No blood, no signs of violence, no indication of illness or poisoning. One detail sent chills down the investigators' spines. A sword was found under the captain's bed with what appeared to be blood on the blade, though later testing was inconclusive. More disturbing were the unexplained marks on the deck railings, deep gouges that looked like claw marks, as if something had scraped its way across the wood. The ship's compass had been destroyed, and the ship's papers, except for the logbook, were missing. The crew of the Dei Gratia searched every inch of the vessel. In the captain's cabin, they found his wife's melodeon, a small organ, with sheet music still on the stand. Sarah Briggs' sewing box was open, with a needle still threaded as if she'd been interrupted mid-stitch. The child's toys were scattered about, and her clothes laid out as if someone was about to dress her. It painted a picture of ordinary life suddenly frozen in time. But the most unnerving discovery was in the ship's hold. When they examined the cargo barrels more closely, they found that while 9 were empty, several others had been opened and resealed. The alcohol fumes in the hold were strong enough to be explosive. Some theorists believe the crew detected fumes and feared an explosion, abandoning ship in panic. But experienced sailors would know that denatured alcohol fumes, while flammable, were unlikely to explode spontaneously. Besides, why not return when no explosion occurred?
The ship's rigging told another strange story. Some sails were set, others furled in ways that made no nautical sense. It was as if someone had been trying to sail the ship but didn't know how, or as if the crew had left in such a rush they couldn't properly secure everything. The mainsail was torn and hanging loose, flapping wildly, yet the ship remained relatively on course, almost as if something was steering it. Salvage hearings were held in Gibraltar, where the Dei Gratia had towed the Mary Celeste. The Attorney General suspected foul play, even suggesting the Dei Gratia's crew had murdered the Mary Celeste's crew for salvage money. But this theory collapsed under scrutiny. The timeline didn't work, and the evidence didn't support it. The court eventually awarded salvage rights, but no explanation was ever given for the abandonment. Theories have multiplied over the 150 years since. Seaquakes that made the crew think the ship was sinking, underwater earthquakes, waterspouts, piracy, dismissed due to the intact cargo, murder-suicide by the captain, impossible, his character was impeccable, mutiny. But why would mutineers leave the ship and its valuable cargo? Giant squid attacks, seriously proposed by some, alien abduction, paranormal forces. Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, wrote a fictional account suggesting murder, which many mistook for fact, further confusing the historical record. Over the years, dozens of solutions have been proposed, but none adequately explain all the evidence. Perhaps the most haunting detail emerged years later, when sailors who served on the Mary Celeste before the incident came forward with disturbing stories. They spoke of hearing strange sounds in the night, scratching from inside the hull, whispers when no one was there, feelings of being watched by unseen eyes. One sailor claimed he saw a dark figure standing in the captain's cabin that vanished when he approached. Others reported compasses spinning wildly for no reason, and a pervasive feeling that something evil resided deep in the ship's hold. The Mary Celeste was eventually sold and continued sailing under different owners, but it carried a curse. Crew members deserted, captains refused to sail on her,
Accidents plagued every voyage. In 1885, Captain Gilman Parker deliberately wrecked the ship in an insurance fraud scheme. Even in its final moments, the Mary Celeste seemed to embody misfortune. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, little Sophia, and the 7 crew members were never found, dead or alive. No wreckage of the lifeboat was ever discovered. No bodies washed ashore. They simply vanished from existence, as if swallowed by the sea or something worse. To this day, maritime historians, investigators, and paranormal researchers debate what happened aboard the Mary Celeste. The evidence suggests the crew left voluntarily, but in great haste, believing they were in immediate mortal danger. But danger from what? What could be so terrifying that 10 experienced sailors would choose to face certain death in a small lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic rather than remain on a perfectly good ship? The Mary Celeste remains the ocean's greatest mystery, a ghost ship in the truest sense, not because it was abandoned, but because whatever drove those people into the dark waters of the Atlantic took the truth with them into the depths, leaving only questions, fear, and the chilling certainty that something terrible happened aboard that vessel, something so horrifying that vanishing into the ocean seemed preferable to staying aboard.